Her attention had been strained, and her eyes dazzled after so many hours in the Louvre. So she allowed herself to collapse onto the green metal bench by the steps leading up to the Richelieu wing. She sat in the afternoon sunlight, nursing an aesthetic headache. The Louvre had swamped her. Endless waves of beauty had washed over her even before she'd navigated corridor after grand, airy corridor, and hauled her wooden panel up countless stairways to the tiny, stuffy room that justified the voyage from America, and where, as she learned on the eve of departure, she'd be working in front of an old painting to pay for her stay in Paris, hers and Teddy's. He ought to be coming along soon. Earlier that morning, at 9:30, Ida had lined up with a dozen other young women and a tiny old man in a musty suit, all of them silent before the little oval desk where a lumbering Frenchman, too large for the furniture, issued each applicant an easel, stool, and dropcloth, made them sign a thick ledger, and warned them not to be late returning the materials in the afternoon if they hoped to be admitted again tomorrow. Just one look at the painting she'd been commissioned to copy for Mrs. Rawling convinced Ida she'd need to come back for many, many tomorrows. Jan van Eyck's Madonna of Chancellor Roland wasn't large, just over 2 feet square, but the detail was astonishing. Far more so than in the monochrome bookplate reproduction she'd consulted for her sketch in the attic of her father's house. And the colors were not what she'd expected. You could never tell from bookplates, but she'd always assumed the Madonna's robes would be blue, as they were in the windows at St. Mary's back in Lake Forest, and in every other church where she'd sat in a pew with her 4 sisters for weddings or first communions, or for her mother's funeral when, as a small child, she'd cried in utter despondency at the loss. But here in the Louvre, she saw Van Eyck's robes were painted a scorching red that made their bright drapery crackle through 5 centuries of yellowed varnish. She set up her easel and perched on the little stool, smoothing her simple blue cotton dress and smock, and setting her wooden panel in place. Van Eyck had worked some 500 years ago, when artists painted more wood than canvas, and she meant to be as meticulous as she could about all the details of reproduction. Despite her eminently French, round-brimmed Breton hat, her shoes and the cut of her dress marked her as an American, though you couldn't say from where exactly, unless you heard her speak.